Genuine wrongdoing, the Keddie Lodge murders, the genuine story behind Lodge 28. In April 1981, 3 individuals were fiercely killed in Keddie, California, and a 12-year-old young lady was seized from the home and thusly killed, as well. Notwithstanding north of 40 years and a few prime suspects, the case stays perplexing. It was April 11, 1981 when a mother, her child, and her child's companion were beaten and cudgeled to death in a California resort lodge. The 4th casualty, a 12-year-old young lady, was taken from the lodge and her remaining parts were found years after the fact. It's been north of a long time since the Keddie Lodge murders occurred, and in numerous ways, it feels like we're no nearer to settling the homicides. Many blame the Plumas Province Sheriff's Office for bungling the examination and permitting the principal suspects to pull off the homicides. In 2013, the case was returned, but we're left with not many responses. Who killed half of the Sharp family alongside one of their local companions? Furthermore, why? Will the excess relatives at any point get equity? In the years since, the case has become so scandalous that a blood and gore film was made in light of the strange story, Lodge 28. Sadly, the principal suspects for the situation have since passed on, and many believe it's past the point of no return for any genuine equity or conclusion. In any case, this has yet to be addressed. What occurred in Lodge 28? About the people in question. Glenna Sue Sharp, 36, leased Lodge 28 in the little local area of Keddie, California. She and her 5 youngsters had been living in the lodge since November 1980, when she moved from Connecticut to be nearer to her sibling, where, after a separation from her significant other, James. The Keddie lodges were recorded as resort lodges, however maybe in name as it were. When Sue and her youngsters moved in, they were at that point neglected and needing fixes. Sue had a couple of seasonal positions in the close-by town of Quincy, California, despite the fact that she actually needed to rely vigorously upon the government assistance framework to scrape by. Some have recommended that while Sue was certainly not a careless mother, she was a missing one. This seems okay in the event that she was maintaining different sources of income. She wouldn't be home frequently. All things considered, Sue gave a valiant effort to accommodate her kids. She was portrayed as a caring mother and made sure that her kids had comfortable garments for winter, regardless of whether she needed to do without. The children. John Sharp, 15, albeit a few sources say he was 16, was portrayed as a piece presumptuous and loaded with himself, as so many teen young men are. Dana Wingate, 17, was John's companion and had somewhat of a grieved past, winding up as a dependent of the government as well as being waiting on the post-trial process in 1981. Both young men delighted in gatherings and young ladies and were extraordinary companions to each other. Tina Sharp, 12, was portrayed as a bashful young lady and a confidential individual with secret concealing spots where she got a kick out of the chance to go to be distant from everyone else. She had a couple of dear companions and, generally, was a typical 12-year-old young lady. In spite of the cross-country move from Connecticut to California, the kids appeared to be fitting in well and making companions. By and large, the family was ordinary and not known to be agitators, regardless of whether the youngsters were in some cases left alone for extended lengths of time. Furthermore, regardless of whether they had been miscreants, that actually wouldn't legitimize their ruthless homicides in Keddie Lodge 28. The evening of the killings. The evening of April 11, 1981 was like some other for the Sharp family. A portion of the youngsters were home, some were chatting with companions, and some would be getting back to in practically no time Lodge 28. Around 10 p.m., Sue had Tina, 12, get back from a neighbor's lodge. Her other girl, Sheila, 14, was remaining for the time being with her companion and Tina needed to do likewise. Tragically, Sue wouldn't permit it, so Tina got back and prepared for bed. John, 15, and Dana, 17, had gone out, catching a ride to the close-by town of Quincy for a party prior to returning soon thereafter. They returned at some point between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. It's accepted that they might have strolled in on the assault underway. Neighbors close to the lodge revealed that they assumed they heard a few muted shouts or moans around 1 or 2 a.m. the evening of the killings. Notwithstanding, they didn't know where the sounds came from, so they eventually wound up returning to rest. The following morning around 8 a.m., Sheila got back to Lodge 28. The front entryway was opened, yet that was typical. She strolled into a loathsomeness scene. Sue, John, and Dana were restricted, bloodied, and expired. Right away, Sheila ran for help, getting back to her companion's lodge and educating her folks concerning what is going on. The dad of Sheila's companion got back to Lodge 28 to get out the 3 young men that were as yet alive, taking them through the window so they wouldn't need to see the crime location. Specialists were reached and shown up soon. The examination. Specialists immediately showed up at the scene and started their examination. The crime location was excessively brutal. A delegate who showed up first on the scene noticed that there was blood all over, on the walls, the roof, the entryways, the back advances, and all around the people in question. The previous Plumas district sheriff said of the killings, this thing was wanted somewhat. The crime location report. The crime location report for the Keddie Lodge murders expresses that the young men's bodies were on the lounge floor with blood around their heads and necks. John had his hands and feet bound with an electrical line that was additionally folded over Dana's feet. John's throat had been cut. Dana had been cudgeled and afterward physically choked. Close by, Sue's hands and feet were additionally limited by electrical wiring. She was exposed starting from the waist and choked with a handkerchief and her own clothing. In any case, it's not accepted that a rape occurred. Her throat had been cut. Sue's body had likewise been covered somewhat with a yellow cover, at times a sign of disgrace from the killer. Moreover, there were some wound blemishes on the walls of the home. The casualties had either been all cut, choked, or clubbed. Weapons left at the scene included bloodied blades, a twisted blade, and a paw hammer. The weapons likewise obviously came from the home, which is to some degree odd to me. On the off chance that somebody planned to go into the home to carry out kill, couldn't they carry their own weapons to be certain they had some as opposed to depending on what was found at the home? Notwithstanding, the homicide scene was a horrendous, brutal, and ridiculous one. Doug Thomas, Plumas Province Sheriff at the hour of the killings, expressed, whoever did this, and there was more than one individual, needed to have blood all over them. Where could Tina have been? It wasn't long following a couple of additional long stretches of researching that police understood that 12-year-old Tina was missing from Lodge 28. Her more youthful siblings and their companion had been abandoned immaculate in the lodge, however she was no more. Since Tina was feeling the loss of, the FBI was brought in to examine the scene also. Why were some left alive? The disclosure of the crime location is odd, most definitely, considering that 3 individuals were killed in Lodge 28 while 3 others were left immaculate. Killed: Glenna Sue Sharp, 36, John Sharp, 15, Dana Wingate, 17. Left alive: Greg Sharp, 5, Ricky Sharp, 10, Justin Eason Smart, 12. Missing: Tina Sharp, 12. Why had 3 individuals in Lodge 28 fiercely killed while 3 others were let be? Moreover, how had the 3 that were immaculate not heard anything the evening of the killings? Greg, Ricky, and Justin all initially guaranteed not to have heard anything that evening. Signs found. While investigating the scene, examiners tracked down a unique finger impression on a handrail that prompted the lodge's secondary passage. The unique finger impression could never be distinguished. They likewise observed that the phone was left hanging free and that every one of the lights had been turned down and the curtains shut. Because of the proof at the scene, specialists accepted that the executioners had been on scene for quite a while. The deadly weapons were accepted to have been left at the scene, a few kitchen blades and a hook hammer. Afterward, a subsequent horrendous blade was found a little ways away, in a garbage can behind the Keddie corner store. A Daisy 880 pellet rifle is likewise remembered to have been utilized in the assault. Despite the fact that examiners gathered various things from the scene, it's muddled the amount of it was helpful. It was a period before conclusive DNA testing, so even with the deadly weapons, there was just a restricted measure of data that specialists could collect from the scene. Justin Eason Smart talked with. Justin Eason Smart, 12, was consulted, and from the beginning, he guaranteed to have envisioned about the killings, as it were. Afterward, he affirmed that he'd saw the homicides. Some have proposed that this implies Justin was engaged with some way, yet I see it as a damaged little fellow who saw something terrible and didn't have the foggiest idea how to handle it. At a certain point, Justin was put under entrancing and he gave a depiction of the suspects, two men that he'd probably seen Sue talking with. One had a mustache and the other was clean-cut with long hair. Justin said that when John and Dana got back from their party, they started contending with the men and the showdown became savage. Justin said that Tina got back a brief time frame later and was accompanied external by one of the men, albeit a few sources say that he said Tina was at that point home dozing. The two men then killed Sue, John, and Dana. The portrayals were put out to the general population, however they never brought about any positive suspects or recognizable pieces of proof. The person who dropped John and Dana off back home was additionally consulted eventually, and it appears as though they were cleared by specialists right off the bat. In any case, I was unable to track down affirmation of this. Years after the fact, Tina's remaining parts found. 3 years after the Keddie Lodge murders on April 22, 1984, somebody gathering bottles in the forest in Butte area, about 60 miles from Keddie, found their thought process were human remaining parts. The region where the remaining parts were found is allegedly truly challenging to track down. It's a spot called Camp 18, approximately 5 miles from Quill Falls. This has prompted some hypothesis that the container tracker was warned in some way into finding Tina's remaining parts, in spite of the fact that there is no proof for this. It's not outside the realm of possibilities that somebody warned the pioneer, however we simply need more proof to as of now demonstrate it. The container tracker reached specialists not long after finding the remaining parts. Policing what they could of Tina's skeleton, and later the clinical inspector affirmed they were that of Tina Sharp through dental records. Purportedly, an unknown 911 guest connected with specialists before the skull was recognized, guaranteeing it was Tina's before the clinical inspector affirmed it. The guest said, "I was watching the information and they were discussing the young lady found at Quill Falls. I was simply contemplating whether you thought about the homicide up in Keddie. In Plumos too, or quite a while back, where a 12-year-old young lady was rarely found, ABC 10. Whoever settled on that 911 decision obviously discovered something else about the Keddie Lodge murders. Sadly, police didn't examine the call until numerous years some other time when the call's recording was found again as specialists were looking again at the case. The primary suspects, Martin Marty Smart and John Bobo Bade. Martin Marty Smart, Justin Eason Smart's stepfather, was thought almost immediately in the examination as having something to do with the killings. He had a companion, John Bobo Bade, who was likewise associated with being involved. Smart lived with his significant other and stepsons only a couple of lodges away in Lodge 26. A likely intention. Smart might have had a thought process in the homicide of Sue Sharp. She'd been meddling in his marriage with his better half, Marilyn Smart. He evidently affirmed this thought process to a guide he met with after the homicides, faulting Sue for Marilyn needing a separation. Analyst Gamberg has expressed, "I think Sue was associated with one of the suspect's spouses, and that she was somewhat guiding the wife about him and his maltreatment. I think this person just flew off the handle." Individuals magazine. In interviews, Marilyn expressed that her significant other was brutal, purportedly attempting to run over her and their child once and threatening to use a blade on her in 1980. It's likewise claimed that Smart, in the wake of losing his employment as a cook, began assembling and selling drugs. I believe it's totally reasonable that Marilyn would have needed a separation subsequent to managing that. A missing mallet and consuming garments. When talked with by examiners, Smart conceded that he was feeling the loss of a blue took care of hook hammer. Numerous years after the fact, in 2016, a man with a metal locator found a blue took care of hook hammer in a lake close to the Keddie property. It looked like the one Smart had portrayed as disappearing. Afterward, an observer has expressed that he saw Smart consuming garments on the morning of the homicides. No ridiculous apparel was recuperated from the culprits at the scene, meaning they either took the garments with them or discarded them. Consuming the garments might have gotten the job done. Where did Smart meet Bo Bubaid? Smart supposedly met John Bo Bubaid while the two of them were in the mental unit at the Veterans Organization, VA, in Reno, Nevada. In any case, there are inquiries concerning the veracity of that alleged gathering, with others asserting that they met somewhere else. While at the VA, Smart revealed side effects of post-awful pressure issue, PTSD, however many accept he was simply attempting to get more cash and advantages. The guide who talked with him revealed that Smart had let him know he was a cook on an army installation and never saw battle, in any event, expressing that he had a simple visit in the military. On the other hand, Bubaid served in the Air Force, but he made many claims that turned out to be untrue as well. He served time for armed robbery in Chicago's Statesville prison. Others who've investigated the Keddie cabin murders case claim that Bubaid was involved in organized crime in Las Vegas, Nevada. In the weeks prior to the Keddie cabin murders, Bubaid had been sleeping on the Smart's couch. When questioned regarding murders, he claimed to have been a police informant for the Chicago DOJ. Some speculate that this is why the Sacramento DOJ didn't look into him too closely. They didn't want to lose a potential informant. Their alibi. Two men in suits and sunglasses arrived around 10 p.m. to Keddie's backdoor bar on the night of April 11, 1981. The men were Marty Smart and Bo Bubaid, along with Smart's wife, Marilyn. Some suggest that Smart and Bubaid wore suits and sunglasses in an effort to draw attention to themselves in order to set up their alibi. Later that night, the co-owner of the bar changed the music from country to rock, something the two men got upset about, and after making a call to complain, they left to go home. They reportedly returned to the bar again after making another call to complain. Some sources state they didn't put on suits and sunglasses until they returned to the bar later. Smart let specialists know that they then, at that point, left the bar around shutting time, approximately 2 a.m. He was given a polygraph assessment, which he supposedly passed. By and by, I don't put a great deal of weight on polygraph assessments. They are a device for specialists to utilize. However, they typically aren't permissible in court. Moreover, it's workable for somebody to bomb a polygraph while coming clean and for somebody to pass it while lying. Policing additionally permitted to lie and tell somebody they fizzled when they really passed, as well as the other way around. Once more, that is only my viewpoint, and it's absolutely conceivable that Smart took it and passed. After the killings. Soon after the homicides, both Smart and Bubaid left Keddie. Smart likewise wrote a letter to his better half, expressing, "I've addressed the cost of your adoration, and now that I've gotten it with 4 individuals' lives, you let me know we are through." Amazing. What else do you need? Marilyn apparently doesn't remember getting the letter, in spite of the fact that she affirmed later that it seemed to be her ex's penmanship. This letter was in police proof, however it was either disregarded or overlooked by the first examiners, regurgitating more bits of gossip that there was some way or another a policing of reality for this situation. Smart's supposed admission. In later years, Smart supposedly admitted that he was the killer to a specialist at the VA in Reno, Nevada. He allegedly needed to clear his inner voice and owned up to the killings, however he didn't know that the instructor could report admissions of manslaughter. The instructor guaranteed he'd reached the DOJ and requested to talk with the specialists chipping away at the Keddie Lodge murder case, and afterward educated them regarding the admission after gathering with them. As indicated by the instructor, this proof was excused as prattle. Later updates. In 2008, Marilyn Smart, Smart's ex, said in a narrative that she associated her ex and Bobaid with carrying out the killings. Notwithstanding, it's beyond any good time to deal with them on the off chance that they carried out the killings on the grounds that Bobaid kicked the bucket in 1988 and Smart passed on in 2000. A messed up examination. In the long years since the Keddie Lodge kills, some have blamed the sheriff's office for messing up the examination. Doug Thomas, the sheriff at the hour of the homicides, and his representative couldn't sort out what the intention was for the severe assaults. The most odd thing is that there is no obvious thought process. Any case without an obvious thought process is the hardest to settle, he told the Quill Waterway Notice in 1987. Why was Tina taken? Obviously, to a great many people seeing this case now, there plainly was a possible rationale to take Tina Sharp. For what other reason could she be the only one missing from the crime location? In later years, the ensuing sheriffs of Plumas District recognized this reality. Previous Plumas District Sheriff Greg Hagwood expressed that he thought Tina was the principal target. He said of the circumstance, "You kill 3 individuals in a lodge and you pass on the remaining parts there to be found. I think Tina was totally vital to why this occurred. I think there was something about Tina that couldn't be passed on there to be found. My solid sense something really doesn't add up about Tina that didn't take into consideration her to be left there." Many have proposed that Tina was taken from the crime location for sexual purposes. The hypothesis is that after the culprits attacked her as well as saved her hostage for some time, they disposed of her remaining parts. Notwithstanding, some have proposed that Tina was killed at the crime location since she was an observer to the attacks and murders. This essentially comes from the way that the advocate who guaranteed that Smart admitted reviewed him saying that Tina had seen excessively and needed to kick the bucket. I'm not completely sold on this hypothesis. Assuming that she was dead at Lodge 28, why not simply leave her body there with the others? It appears to be a loss to have taken her cadaver and disposed of it somewhere else, and an expanded potential for somebody to find the suspects moving a body. Of course, it's conceivable, and more bizarre things have occurred. An irreconcilable situation? Sheriff Doug Thomas additionally mentioned help from the California Division of Equity, DOJ, in 1981, however they didn't completely finish as per Plumas Province Sheriff's Extraordinary Examiner Mike Gamberg in 2018. Besides, the Sacramento DOJ sent more than 2 specialists from the Coordinated Wrongdoing Unit, not the Murder Unit, to research the wrongdoing. Since Bobaid was supposed to be in some coordinated wrongdoing circles, this appears to be legit. As per Gamberg, the DOJ had an interest in one of the primary suspects, Bobaid. He's proposed that the DOJ might have safeguarded Bobaid, despite the fact that there is no proof that has been made public that recommends this. At the hour of the killings, Gamberg was a representative with the Plumas Region Sheriff's Office. Nonetheless, he was terminated, and he's recognized that his quarrelsome character could be a justification for that. Afterward, he was restored, and he guaranteed that Sheriff Thomas kept him out of the Keddie Lodge examination. Sheriff Thomas and Marty Smart were supposedly incredible buddies and really got to know each other. Thomas even lived in Lodge 28 before the Sharps' appearance in Keddie. At the point when Smart was experiencing difficulty with Marilyn, his better half, Thomas permitted Smart to live with him in Lodge 28. Whether Thomas and Smart had such a dear kinship and in the event that it was a calculate not examining the case all the more intently stays far from being obviously true. Unquestionably, there is by all accounts in any event some proof highlighting a possible irreconcilable situation. 2013, the Keddie case returned. In 2013, New Plumas area Sheriff Greg Hagwood chose to investigate the case once more. It had been north of a long time since the Keddie Lodge murders they actually stayed inexplicable. He connected with Gamberg, who at that point was a confidential examiner, to investigate the case again to check whether it very well may be settled. Unorganized evidence. When Gamberg started going through the boxes of evidence, he realized that everything was in disarray. Some of the evidence in storage was contaminated, the original case history log was missing, and nothing was where it should have been. He said of the case, "This case is as screwed up as a soup sandwich. It's not about what was done, but what was not done." It was during this time when Gamberg was sifting through the evidence that they found the recording of the 911 caller, the one who suggested the found remains were Tina's well before the medical examiner released that information. More accomplices out there? Authorities still believe there are accomplices out there who might have more information about the Keddie cabin murders. I believe there are two individuals that are alive and accessories after the fact, Detective Mike Gamberg has said. Former Sheriff Hagwood has said of other suspects in the case. There are people locally who know more than they've said, and I believe we've identified some of them, and we know who they are, and we know where they are. And I have every confidence that they either participated after the fact or they have first-hand information. Plumas News. Even with a new eye on the evidence, investigators were unable to come to any definitive conclusions about the Keddie cabin murders. The case remains unsolved to this day. Theories on what happened. As with so many cases that have gone unsolved for decades, there are a number of theories in the Keddie cabin murder case. Some are in the realm of plausibility while others are outlandish conspiracy theories. That's not to say that some of the conspiracy theories are impossible, but many of them are improbable. I tried to stick to the more probable theories here for the sake of brevity and clarity. Smart and Boubade committed the murders. The most prominent theory is that Marty Smart and Bo Boubade committed the murders. Even without definitive evidence, like DNA or fingerprints, that they were responsible, there is still a lot of circumstantial evidence pointing to them. Especially when it comes to Smart, the circumstances and indirect evidence seem to indicate his culpability. The letter to his wife confessing to the murders. His alleged confession to the VA counselor. Reporting his hammer missing, and then later a hammer matching that description being found out in a pond near the cabin. Burning clothes on the morning after the murders. Having a motive to kill Sue for interfering in his marriage. Leaving Keddie shortly after the murders took place. Having a buddy-buddy relationship with the sheriff at the time, which meant he might have been overlooked as a suspect. Of course, it's possible that there is a reasonable explanation for all of the aforementioned points, but that's a lot of evidence to explain away if Smart is not guilty. Of course, since Smart died in 2000, he isn't here to defend himself from such accusations. Disorderly proof. At the point when Gamberg began going through the containers of proof, he understood that everything was in disorder. A portion of the proof away was debased, the first case history log was missing, and nothing was where it ought to have been. He said of the case, "This case is pretty much as messed up as a soup sandwich. There's really no need to focus on what was finished, yet what was not finished. It was during this time when Gamberg was filtering through the proof that they tracked down the recording of the 911 guest. The person who recommended the found remaining parts were Tina's well before the clinical inspector delivered that data. More assistants out there? Specialists actually accept there are accessories out there who could have more data about the Keddie Lodge murders. I accept there are two people that are alive and embellishments sometime later, analyst Mike Gamberg has said. Previous Sheriff Hackwood has said of different suspects for the situation. There are individuals locally who realize more than they've said, and I accept we've recognized some of them, and we know what their identity is, and we know where they are. Furthermore, I have each certainty that they either partook sometime later or they have direct data. Plumas News. Indeed, even with another eye on the proof, examiners couldn't reach any authoritative decisions about the Keddie Lodge murders. The case stays strange right up till now. Speculations on what occurred. As with such countless cases that have gone perplexing for a really long time, there are various hypotheses in the Keddie Lodge murder case. Some are in the domain of credibility while others are stunning paranoid fears. This isn't to imply that a portion of the paranoid fears are inconceivable, however a significant number of them are unrealistic. I attempted to adhere to the more plausible hypotheses here for curtness and clearness. Smart and Bubaid carried out the killings. The most noticeable hypothesis is that Marty Smart and Bo Bubaid carried out the killings. Indeed, even without conclusive proof, like DNA or fingerprints, that they were mindful, there is still a ton of incidental proof highlighting them. Particularly with regards to Smart, the conditions and roundabout proof appear to demonstrate his culpability. The letter to his significant other admitting to the homicides. His supposed admission to the VA instructor. Revealing his sledge missing, and afterward a mallet matching that portrayal being figured out in a lake close to the lodge. Consuming garments on the morning after the killings. Having a thought process to kill Sue for meddling in his marriage. Leaving Keddie soon after the killings occurred. Having an agreeable relationship with the sheriff at the time, which implied he might have been disregarded as a suspect. Obviously, it's conceivable that there is a sensible clarification for all of the previously mentioned places. However, that is a great deal of proof to rationalize on the off chance that Smart isn't liable. Obviously, since Smart kicked the bucket in 2000, he hasn't arrived to guard himself from such allegations. One of Sue's beaux dedicated the homicides. In spite of the fact that Sue's ex was conclusively not the killer, he lived on the opposite side of the country at that point. Sue's other heartfelt interests couldn't be precluded with such ease. In her year and a half in Keddie, Sue had gone through 3 sweethearts, albeit honestly none of the connections had been excessively serious. Sue's heartfelt advantages were researched by specialists and appear to have been precluded. Her most recent beau last saw her 2 days before the homicides, recommending he wasn't the guilty party. It's as yet conceivable that he or one of different sweethearts carried out the killings. There simply isn't much of freely delivered proof highlighting any of them as serious suspects. Drugs were the intention. There is a few proof that both John and Dana were engaged with certain medications. An article in the Quill Stream release written in May 1987 states, John Sharp had once broken into a house and taken some cannabis, and Dana Wingate was a ward of the court and waiting on the post-trial process. One observer likewise approached guaranteeing that Dana had taken some LSD from nearby street pharmacists, yet no proof could be found to back up this explanation. Everything that being expressed, a couple of teens fiddling with drugs, doesn't be guaranteed to imply that the killings were committed due to tranquilized contribution. Killing 3 individuals and snatching and killing 1 more over a modest quantity of cannabis or LSD appears to be somewhat of an outrageous reaction. Moreover, assuming this killing was some kind of retribution for the young men taking little amounts of medications, For what reason were the 3 young men in the receiving area left immaculate? Shouldn't everybody in the home have been killed on the grounds that they'd saw or heard the wrongdoings occurring? I'm not persuaded that the medication point assumed a significant part for this situation. In any case, it is conceivable that policing extra medication-based proof that they're keeping from the general population. A theft turned out badly. Some have said that the homicides were never planned, but instead the consequence of a burglary turned out badly. All things considered, the weapons that the murders utilized were taken from the home. In the event that somebody planned to go into the home to carry out kill, unquestionably they could have carried their own weapons with them, no? I can see this perspective and I concur that it is odd that the weapons utilized were taken from the home. However, there is additionally no proof that anything was taken from Lodge 28. The Sharps were not a well-off family and they could not have possibly had a lot to take in any case. On the off chance that a looter was to focus on a home, how could they focus on this one? Besides, how could the robbers carry out such fierce homicides assuming their goal was simply to ransack the spot? It's one thing to choke somebody to kill them, and completely one more to invest a ton of energy on the scene while tormenting the people in question. There appears to have been a level of fury and outrage to this killing, feelings that a standard looter would be probably not going to have. Likewise with any hypothesis, however, it's conceivable that a looter, or burglars, went in, blew up that pretty much nothing remained to be taken, and afterward tormented and killed the casualties prior to stealing Tina. What do I suppose occurred? The Keddie Lodge murder case is a tangled one, jumbled more by the 40 years that have passed since the homicides. Regardless of this, I feel pretty unequivocally that Smart and Bobade were the right suspects for this situation. There is a great deal of conditional proof pointing at Smart, and in this way Bobade by affiliation, the vast majority of which won't be quickly rationalized. Proof focuses to Smart. The way that Smart not just admitted in that frame of mind to his significant other, yet additionally to a VA guide, persuades me to think that he and Bobade were liable for the Keddie Lodge murders. Admitting to wrongdoings one didn't carry out is uncommon, however not unbelievable, and I just own it's conceivable that Smart lied. That being said, I think he was coming clean. Beside the admissions, there is the mallet that was found matching Smart's portrayal of his own missing sledge, an observer that saw him copying garments, the way that he left Keddie soon after the killings, and so on. These activities are exceptionally peculiar for somebody who professed to be honest. Different speculations. Presently, is it conceivable that one of different speculations for this situation is the right one? Obviously. I question that these merciless homicides were the consequence of unimportant medication contribution or a burglary turned out badly, essentially in view of how vicious they were. The just other culprits that would have been so savage was somebody extremely furious, maybe like one of Sue's ex-darlings. Notwithstanding, in view of the openly accessible proof available anywhere, not a solitary one of them were at any point thought about suspects or even people of interest. Therefore, I question any of them were involved. Trust remains. Regardless of the time that has elapsed, specialists are as yet confident that this case can be tackled authoritatively, that is, to have every one of the solutions to every one of their inquiries. I figure it would lift a fantastic load to clear the dull skies that have loomed over that local area and the enduring relatives, previous Plumos Region Sheriff Greg Hackwood has said. Gary Wingate, Dana's dad, has said of the case. No one has even the remotest clue who murdered my child, so I quite a while in the past needed to let this thing go or it would decimate me. I don't consider it. I don't go to that apparition town and I have no clue assuming phantoms exist there. Be that as it may, I truly do know this. There is malicious in this world, and evil was in that house that evening, unsettled. Sheila, Sue's little girl who strolled in and found the crime location, told Individuals magazine, I don't think there truly is any kind of definite conclusion in a homicide case. We actually need to live on without our friends and family. She trusts that the case will one day be absolutely settled. Specialists actually accept that there are those out there that know more or have more data about the Keddie Lodge murders. It's been very lengthy, and albeit a few suspects for the situation might be gone now, it may not be past the point of no return for a fair consequence to be given. Case updates. There have been various updates for this situation throughout the long term, the greater part of which I covered previously. Notwithstanding, there are a couple of others that I didn't specify that I'll incorporate here. 2004, Lodge 28 destroyed. In 2004, Lodge 28 was destroyed as it had been censured constructing. Other close-by structures around the lodge were likewise flattened.
Nex adu immortalis, libri spondeo nex, advei hoc mort animadverto, operor non timeo. Zalus est proculmano,